This is a podcast from BFM 89.9, the business station.
BFM 89.9. Good afternoon. I'm Roshan, Kanesan, and welcome to Enterprise Explores, the show where we help you navigate the ever-changing universe of business from the headlines to the bottom line. Today's global economy is full of uncertainties, to say the least. From shifting trade routes to rising protectionism, in response, many countries are working hard to stay competitive, and some are moving quicker than others. In its latest review, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or more commonly known as the OECD, urged Malaysia to step its game up and boost competitiveness, pointing to long-standing challenges such as sluggish productivity, weak private investment, and slow-moving reforms. At the same time, neighbours like Vietnam and Indonesia were highlighted as pushing ahead with aggressive policy moves to attract investors and grow their economies. So, what's holding us back and what needs to change? Joining us today is Dr. Carmelo Ferlito, CEO of the Centre for Market Education, to take a hard look at Malaysia's economic competitiveness, where we stand in the region, and what it will really take to keep us relevant. Dr. Carmelo, can you hear me loud and clear?
Loud and clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. So, first things first, when we talk about economic competitiveness, what do economists mean and how do we measure this?
Well, thanks for having me. And I must say that this is not an easy question in the sense that we don't lack indexes that try to measure competitiveness. But I would say that probably among the several indexes that we have in economics, this is one of those that is more complicated to calculate and requires a lot of subjective evaluations. So if we follow, in example, the definition from the World Economic Forum, we should say that the competitiveness is the set of institutions, policies, and factors that determine the level of productivity of a country. So they tend to include elements like institutions, infrastructure, technology, macroeconomic stability, skills, and etc., financial markets, and etc., to measure productivity. On the other end, we have the IMD World Competitiveness Ranking, which is actually more limited. It covers only 67 countries and tries to measure how well countries manage their resources to create long-term value. So I believe that while we all have an idea of what competitiveness means, so we all can have some intuition about it, I would say that a very reliable or non-disputable definition is far from being there. And I also believe that we have always to remain very cautious about these indexes, which are useful guidelines. They are there, we use them, but we always have to keep in mind that they include a lot of subjective evaluations.
So like all metrics and numbers, it's also important to keep them in mind, but as a guiding point, but don't take them, at face value, because there's a lot of subjectiveness that goes into it. Now, of course, one number that we often look to for in terms of a gauge of productivity is GDP, right? That's one of those headline numbers that we use. But what are deeper signs in your view that show a country's true competitiveness?
GDP, which has almost become a religion, I must say. I mean, as far as people see a plus there, everybody is happy. But I'm afraid that the situation is much more complicated. If, in example, you have the GDP that grows because government has spent a lot of money and that spending has been financed via additional debt, then you have the magic plus. We may have even a very high number following the plus, but that you are destroying the economy, creating inflation and unemployment. So GDP and even GDP growth per se is not enough to measure competitiveness, I believe. I think that if we remain confined to GDP, probably the most important element to measure how strong and how competitive is an economy is the investment figure, in particular private investment. figure. So here I'm not referring to what we usually call foreign investments, which is another type of measurement, completely different, but what is called gross fixed capital formation in the GDP and the rate of growth. In example, Malaysia last year posted a very significant growth in investment, and for the first time after many years, the pace of growth of investment was faster than the pace of growth of consumption. Then I think that other elements that are important when we evaluate competitiveness should be the so-called ease of doing business. I think that is very, very good indicator. And in general, I would say that a country is competitive when is able to attract and unleash entrepreneurial spirits. Then measuring this capability, I think, is another story.
So as I used this in the opening here, the OECD just this week flagged some concerns about Malaysia's economic fundamentals and competitiveness. Carmelo, is this a wake-up call or just another reminder to act on issues that we are actually quite well aware of?
I think yes, that I didn't find anything particularly new in the report, to be honest. But I didn't find what I consider to be the main important problems of the Malaysian economy. So one of the main considerations in the report is about fiscal sustainability. So it seems that the OECD recognized that fiscal deficit is declining. And indeed, it declined between 2023 and 2024 from 5 to 4.1%. But OECD is afraid of what could happen with targeted subsidies, the way in which these things are implemented, the potential consequences on price. And so the OECD flagged out that what is missing in the government action is probably a comprehensive strategy on spending cuts. And this is one of the main points. Then the other points that the report mention are mostly social issues, in particular social protection, social assistance, labor skill mismatch, and gender gap. All issues that I believe, as maybe we can discuss this more in detail later, are somehow related with the structure of Malaysian capitalism, which is extremely unbalanced toward the role of micro businesses.
So issues like weak productivity, low private investment, labor force participation, things that keep surfacing on top of the things that you've mentioned as well. In your view, which are the more material challenges to keep in mind and pay attention to?
So again, private investment, finally, we see a reawakening, and hopefully the pace will remain in the next years. Then again, productivity, labor force, social issues. I think, as I just mentioned, that this conversation will remain unsettled until we recognize that an important block to improvement is the prevalence of micro businesses on one side of the economy. They are small and medium enterprises are 97, 98% of the total, and they contribute to less than 40% of the GDP. Micro enterprises are 78% of the total. On the other side, we have 2% of giant businesses, which are often government or government-linked businesses. And I think that this dichotomy is an important block toward the creation, toward the emergence of a healthy production structure. Because if you look in particular at social issues like social protection, but something that is very dear to me, social mobility in particular, I think it can't be enhanced, improved within a framework of micro businesses.
Why is that so?
Well, think about social mobility. If you work in a company made of the owner plus 2 or 3 employees, what are the chances for you to grow in that company? Either you buy the company yourself, or imagine a small family restaurant. If you are the cook, either you are the cook or you serve at the tables. Nothing wrong with it, but obviously there is no chance for you to grow inside that company. And that company, in those companies, often margins are limited. So the possibility for them to offer good packages of social protections are extremely limited. And as far as they remain small, also their ability to improve technologically speaking and therefore unleash other kind of mechanisms remain extremely limited. So the point of industrial concentration, I think, is a point that should be raised more often in the conversation.
Carmelo, we got more to discuss, including how we stack up regionally and a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the structural challenges here. But first, a few messages. Folks, this is Enterprise Explores, the show where we navigate the ever-changing universe of business from the headlines to the bottom line. And today, I'm speaking with Dr. Carmelo Ferlito, CEO for the Centre for Market Education, about Malaysia's economic competitiveness and some of the structural issues at play. I'm Roshan. We'll be back in just a bit, so keep it here to BFM 89.9. The business station.
Building Future Malaysia. BFM 89.9, the business station.
Yes, it is BFM 89.9 and you're listening to Enterprise Explores, the show where we help you navigate the ever-changing universe of business from the headlines to the bottom line. I'm Roshan, Kanesan, and on the back of a recent call from the OECD for Malaysia to improve its economic competitiveness by addressing some deep-rooted structural issues. I'm speaking with Dr. Carmelo Ferlito, CEO for the Centre for Market Education, to talk about those economic fundamentals and what needs to change for us to do better on a more competitive level. Carmelo, we talked about the OECD's wake-up call of reminder and, of course, a view on competitiveness a little earlier. And there's a lot of subjectivity that goes into it, but there are some key things like private investment that can really determine a country's competitiveness, or at least can better assess. Now, when we look beyond our borders here, right, there are some countries like Vietnam and Indonesia have been noted as making improvements on these on the regional stage. How does Malaysia compare with them, and what do we need to do, I guess, to compete better, if at all?
Well, let me guide you a little bit through the results from the IMD World Competitiveness booklet that was published in 2024. So with the latest results of 2024, what emerged there on a regional scale is that Indonesia improved a lot in the world ranking from the 40 position to the 27. Singapore from 1 to 1, so from being the first, remain the first in the past 5 years. Thailand slightly improved, 29 from 29 to 25, and Malaysia unfortunately deteriorated from 27 to 34 position. And where do we see, if we look at the subcomponents, where is the strongest deterioration is on business efficiency, the way in which IMD measure business efficiency. The others are quite stable, a slight deterioration in government efficiency and improvement in economic performance. Then if I look at business efficiency, the problem that is pointed out is indeed productivity, together with management practices, but really where Malaysia doesn't score well is on productivity and efficiency. And in terms of government efficiencies, it seems there has been a deterioration in business in the business legislation, so in all the systems of rules surrounding businesses. So and I think that the two things are are the points that we have somehow highlighted so far. So efficiency is strongly related also to size of companies, to processes and procedures. Governments, we know that we have experienced several governments in the past years, and regulations have changed. And I pointed many times that probably this is the moment to look into our business regulations and to try to rationalize, look at what was done well and maintain it possibly, and what has been deteriorated and trash it and improve it. And I think we should not delay that process of reflection.
So efficiency is a big part of this equation, right? Where, however you want to look at that, it's a big part of it, and it goes back to this stat that we have so many smaller businesses, right? And smaller businesses are inherently less efficient and all of that. Carmelo, if we dig a little deeper beneath the surface here, with everything we've discussed so far, what do you see as Malaysia's biggest structural weaknesses in this regard, right? What's holding us back here?
Yeah, I'd like to repeat myself. I think that the biggest block is really the overprevalence of micro businesses, 78%. And I think this is not, peculiar only for Malaysia. If you look at other countries, even in Europe, there is this high prevalence of small and medium enterprises, Malaysia even micro enterprises. But what is quite a unique feature for Malaysia is the relatively low contribution to GDP that these firms produce. So we have 97 to 98% of businesses producing around 37-38% of the GDP, and 2% doing the rest.
Wow.
If put it like that, we have 2% of firms producing 62-63% of the GDP. This tells us something precisely in terms of efficiency. So, and imagine that these 97% of small companies employ around half of the workforce. So it means that almost the totality of firms, which are medium and small, employ half of the workforce, but produce less than 40% of the GDP. And this is really where I think we should look seriously into this problem. And has been mentioned, I think, a few years ago by Johari Ghani in some interview when he was not yet a minister, and I think probably was the only moment in which this topic emerged in the public conversation, and I think we should bring it back to the public conversation.
So we have too many small businesses, and they contribute less than 40% of GDP, but employ more than half the workforce. Why is that a concern or weakness, Carmelo? Tell us a little bit more.
So you see, this tells us that economic improvement, economic jumps cannot happen with this disaggregation. And as I mentioned in other occasions, I think that the biggest blocks are really on social mobility, social protection, and technological development. I think about the first 2 points we have already discussed, but the third point is also important. How can you think? We talk always about replacing foreign workers with automation through better wages and etc. But we have to be realistic with this structure of capitalism. Even if firms, businesses would have the financial resources for automation, for the adoption of high-tech machineries, this would simply not make sense because of the scale of business. First point. Second, obviously also processes of R&D, processes of research are difficult to happen in this stage of capitalism when resources and economies of scale are not there. There is a beautiful book. It's a bit old, I think, from the early 1960s, 1960 or late 1950s, but I think still remain the Bible at this regard. It's called Oligopoly and Technical Progress by an Italian economist, Paolo Silos Labini, passed away in 2005, if I'm not mistaken. And I think we have a lot of useful reflections in that book on this topic.
Of those reflections, which one would you like to highlight in particular today, to kind of tease people to go and read the book?
Paolo Silos Labini was a student of Schumpeter, and Schumpeter was very critical about a capitalism that was evolving toward oligopolies and big structures, and said this capitalism cannot innovate, because he had in mind the heroic stage of capitalism in the 19th centuries with individual entrepreneurs. And Silos Labini, as a student, says No, look, actually, big businesses will be the future of innovation. We cannot conceive in the future innovation without big businesses. And big businesses will interact with small businesses in the process of innovation through in the stage of implementation. They will need to interact, to fish on new ideas, to fish on dynamism that is in smaller businesses, and they will have the strength to implement those ideas and to turn them in actual innovations. So we should not be afraid of big businesses, and we should, when they are the result of market forces, not when they are there because of the result of government protection, but when they are the healthy outcome of market forces. We should not be afraid, because these are the businesses that can get better opportunities for the people and better opportunities for technological development.
So it sounds like we need to see more organic consolidation in the marketplace, in capitalism here in Malaysia.
Absolutely, and I often made an example. If you look at our agriculture, Malaysia has a problem of self-sufficiency on rice. Yeah, I think that was in these days it was signing an agreement for import from rice even from Indonesia. On the other side, remaining in agriculture, one of the most successful example is the poultry business, where Malaysia is self-sufficient. It's the only livestock in which Malaysia is self-sufficient. So why is the poultry business successful? Precisely because there has been no obstacle toward integration. And now the business is dominated by big groups, even listed companies that adopt certain kind of procedures, certain kind of health controls, certain kind of technologies, and they could adopt top technologies precisely because they were allowed to consolidate. Look at our paddy industry, where the scale of paddy is kept small by law. So the paddies cannot grow because of the regulation surrounding that. And therefore, how can you think to adopt better technologies if the holders are kept artificially small by law? And I think this example help us to clarify what I have in mind.
Yeah, because I guess with economies of scale, but also that you need to be able to amortize that cost, right, over a larger ability to produce or productivity. Basically, you don't want to invest without the ability to kind of cover those costs and get payback and see an ROI.
Absolutely. I mean, if you have a small cafe, you may think to buy a coffee roaster, a grinder, and import your own beans. But if you have 20 customers per day, even if you have the financial capacity to buy those machines probably doesn't make sense, the investment at all.
Yeah, you're literally roasting the money.
Roasting the money, yes. But you cannot drink them.
So at this point then, Carmelo, the big question is, how do we move forward, right? Are there, how does the country move forward in terms of reforms or in terms of capitalism, how businesses should be prioritizing their efforts going ahead? Where do we move forward from here?
I think here is a mix of policy environment where certain moves can be conceived. I have in mind, in example, network fiscal incentives for business networks, so whereby businesses that decide to consolidate in order to export, to be more aggressive in the markets, get special fiscal benefits, and so they are supported in their growth, and that is where policy can make a difference. On the other side, I think we also have a cultural issue, probably, where everybody likes to be the king of a small garden rather than a count or a marquis in a big empire. And this resonates well with me because Italian capitalism has more or less the same issue. So I see a lot of similarities between my original country and my adoption country, let's say. And so here there are cultural processes that needs to happen, which goes really beyond the policy reflection.
Yeah, and in some semblance, maybe even a little bit of ego, right? In terms of you want to be your ego and narcissism. You want to be your own boss, and I can do it better, so I should be the business owner and the leader. And sometimes, you hear this offline a little bit. People want to do deals and consolidate, but there is a little bit of in the deal making, the price doesn't reflect the business fundamentals because, it's my business, it's my baby, so I value it at this much. So these are some of those cultural issues that come to play, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's exactly the same back in my old countries. I was trying to speak with business people, get together, get one salesperson that goes around the world with a full package of products within the supply chain. But then there is mistrust between the different business owners, and but later that salesperson will not devote to my products the same attention to the other products. So. Yeah, here there is a lot of work to be done, I believe.
Let's try and pivot a little bit, right? Right now it's all sounding very doom and gloom, Carmelo. So let's talk a little bit about some areas where, in your view, Malaysia does better, right? Performs well, and perhaps ways we can leverage those advantages and scale them up.
I think Malaysia, as historically, if you look at the regional perspective, as had the capacity to really become, at least at a certain point in history, an hub for investors. And this was a mix of different things. Was a welcoming culture, so being open to others, being open to who is different from us. Was a mix of a wise infrastructure policy, or at least an infrastructure policy that was much better than the one from neighbor countries, special schemes for companies that decide to have a regional hub in Malaysia, recognizing that Malaysia as a market per se has its own limitations, building a good educational system, investing in healthcare. So building not only the business ecosystem, but also the surrounding ecosystem, so that to set up businesses in Malaysia has a competitive advantage when compared to the neighbor countries. No minimum paid up capital, in example, for foreign businesses, etc. So I think that Malaysia probably doesn't need to do much new, but rediscover what was done right in the past that built Malaysia as a successful country. I mean, if you look at the fact that Malaysia relies so much on foreign workers, and people look at this as a negative thing, it's actually an extremely positive thing, because it means that there are better jobs for the locals, and the locals don't need to do that. So chapeau to Malaysia on this. So look at the past, look at what has built the success of Malaysia, and try to reinterpret and reinvent those same factors and readapt them in the current scenario. That's it.
Carmelo, I think it's a great place to wrap up our conversation today. As always, a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for your time today, sir.
Thank you. The pleasure was mine. Keep in touch.
Folks, you've been listening to Enterprise Explores, the show where we help you navigate the ever-changing universe of business from the headlines to the bottom line. And today I was speaking with Dr. Carmelo Ferlito, CEO for the Center for Market Education. And if you missed any part of the conversation, you definitely want to go and check the podcast out on our website at www.bfm.my or download the BFM app. Our shows are, of course, available wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Just look for Enterprise Explores by BFM Media. I'm Roshan, Kanesan. This is BFM 89.9, the business station.
You have been listening to a podcast from BFM 89.9, the business station. For more stories of the same kind, download the BFM app.